You arrive at the edge of your own life, the same way every man eventually does, quietly, without applause, without anyone noticing that something inside you has begun to shift. The familiar voices fade first. The noise of the world that once wrapped around you like a blanket starts thinning, unraveling, revealing the cold air beneath, and suddenly, it's just you, your breath, and the weight of your own footsteps echoing against a horizon you no longer recognize. This is the moment every man knows instinctively, the desert of the self, where comfort ends, and true solitude begins its slow, merciless work. Musashi stepped into that desert long before he became a legend. He was not summoned by destiny. He wasn't chosen by prophecy. He walked out of his home as a boy because something old in his spirit whispered, "Leave now, or die as the man they want you to be." It was not noble. It was not ceremonial. It was an exile he chose for himself, a self-imposed disappearance into a wilderness that would strip him, starve him, sharpen him. But today, your desert looks different. Your exile is digital. You stand surrounded by millions of faces, and yet untouched by a single soul. Endless scrolling, endless noise, endless proximity without real presence. You are alone, not because the world is empty, but because nothing in it reaches you. And yet, solitude is not punishment. It is initiation. The desert shows you who you are when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one is waiting to see what you become. It is the great mirror, indifferent, silent, merciless. Walk deeper. The heat, the quiet, the distance, they are not here to break you. They are here to reveal you. There comes a certain heaviness when you choose a road no one else around you understands. Not dramatic, not tragic, a quiet gravity that clings to the bones. The weight of knowing that what you're doing cannot be explained without being diminished. And so you stop explaining entirely. You keep walking because the alternative is betrayal, not of the world, but of yourself. Musashi wandered the provinces of Japan with no master, no map, no noble banner tied to his back. A ronin of intention, a man who replaced certainty with direction, replaced approval with purpose. He slept under trees, bathed in rivers, trained in abandoned temples where the wind itself seemed to whisper doubts meant only for him. The empty roads were his only companions, roads that offered him nothing but the chance to become someone worthy of his own respect. And you feel a similar ache, not from walking, but from choosing. While others anchor themselves to the nearest comfort, you step towards something larger, something formless, something few even admit they want. You feel the loneliness of being the only one in your circle with ambition that refuses to die quietly. The only one who looks at the path ahead and says, "I will take the silence if it means finding who I am meant to be." The empty road tests a man. It asks him to walk without witnesses, without praise, without validation. This is where most turn back, not because the journey is difficult, but because no one is watching them endure it. But distance is the birthplace of legends. No crowd has ever forged greatness. No audience has ever sculpted mastery. The men who stand apart in history first stood apart in life, walking roads so empty that even their own shadow felt too distant to rely on. Keep walking. The silence is heavy, because the man you are becoming is heavy too. There is a moment in every long solitude where the loneliness stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like instruction. At first, the silence bites. It gnaws at your confidence, drags your mind into old regrets, forces your insecurities to rise from the depths like ghosts. You try to outrun it. You try to fill it. You try to drown it. But silence is patient. It waits until you finally stop resisting. And only then does it begin to teach. Musashi trained alone, not because he preferred it, but because he understood its brutal mercy. Forests became his dojo. Rivers carried away his fear each time he submerged his doubts beneath their current. He practiced beneath ruined temple roofs, blades cutting through dust-filled air, while birds watched from broken beams. When no one else was there to correct him, silence did. When no teacher stood over him, the world itself became his stern master. You know this teacher too, even if you haven't named it. When you sit alone in your room, and the world stops speaking back, that discomfort you feel is not a flaw, it is instruction. Solitude reveals your addictions to noise, to validation, to constant distraction. It shows you how rarely you've met your real self without the filters of society pressed against your skin. And slowly, the silence becomes a whetstone. Every fear sharpened into clarity. Every doubt scraped into discipline. Every insecurity pressed until it becomes identity. The blade of who you are begins to take shape, cutting through old stories, false attachments, and illusions about what you thought you needed. What solitude removes, it replaces with strength. It takes your neediness and gives you resolve. It takes your confusion and gives you direction. It takes your scattered focus and makes it precise enough to carve a new life. This is the strange mercy of silence. It breaks you only to rebuild you with a steel you didn't know you carried. Before a man rises, he descends into a private war, not the kind sung about in songs or described in ancient chronicles, but the unseen battles that unfold beneath the ribs, invisible to the world, unforgettable to the soul. These are the conflicts that carve depth into a man long before anyone sees the result. Musashi's enemies were not the duelists, whose names faded in the shadows of his legacy. His true opponents were internal, fear that crept into his hands before a fight, ego whispering that he was already enough, doubt circling the edges of his mind like a storm waiting to break. People imagine him as a flawless warrior, but the truth is harsher. He trembled. He questioned himself. He felt the crushing solitude of a man rebuilding himself from the inside out. You fight these same enemies, though yours wear different armor. You battle your hesitation when you want to move forward, your guilt when you choose growth over comfort, your self-doubt when the road stretches too far with no clear end. No one applauds this fight. No one sees the nights you lie awake, wondering if you're deluding yourself. No one witnesses the small victories, the day you resisted an old temptation, the morning you got up, even though you felt hollow. These moments are invisible, but they are the bricks of transformation. The modern world hides these battles under polite routines. People post their wins, their highlights, their curated victories. But the war that shapes a man is fought in silence, in the dark corners of his mind where he either sharpens his courage or lets it rust. There are battlefield scars you carry that no one will ever know, wounds from expectations, from rejection, from the loneliness of being the only one willing to go further than others think reasonable. But understand this, legends are not forged in public. They are forged in these invisible victories, the ones you win when the world is not watching. When the temptation to quit is louder than the desire to continue. When you stand alone and still choose to rise. No one sees this battle, but the man you become is shaped entirely by it. There is a kind of distance that weak men fear and strong men cultivate, the space between who they are and who the world wants them to be. Distance is not coldness. It is discipline. It is the courage to remain apart until your spirit is sharp enough to withstand the weight of belonging. Musashi understood this with an instinct bordering on destiny. He refused to settle. He refused to marry early. He refused to soften his edge just to fit into the shape society expected of him. This wasn't cruelty or arrogance. It was protection. He knew that if he stepped into comfort too soon, he would lose the very fire that set him apart. He wasn't avoiding life. He was preparing for it. And you know this burden well? People call you distant because they don't understand your mission. They call you obsessed because they cannot imagine wanting anything deeper than comfort. They call you selfish because they feel abandoned when you choose growth over familiarity. But distance is not a rejection. It is alignment. It is the forge where identity is heated, hammered, and strengthened away from the soft hands of convenience. There is a delicate balance to maintain. Too close, and you melt into the expectations of others. Too far, and you freeze into isolation. But when you hold the right distance, something powerful happens. Your focus sharpens. Your priorities harden. Your vision becomes unmistakable. You stop living as a reflection of the world and begin living as an embodiment of your purpose. Distance also filters people. It repels those who want you for who you used to be and reveals those who respect who you are becoming. It's not a punishment. It's protection. A quiet shield guarding the fragile, forming version of the man you are still creating. Stay slightly out of reach. Not to hide, but to build. Legends are not found in the center of the crowd. They are crafted just beyond its edges, where distance itself becomes a discipline. Every lonely climb eventually leads to a horizon, where silence breaks, not because the world became kinder, but because you became someone worth meeting. True connection is not given, it is earned, and the men who walk alone longest often find the strongest brotherhood at the peak. Musashi did not meet equals until he had already shaped himself into a man of undeniable presence. Students arrived not because he sought them, but because they recognized something in him, a stillness, a discipline, a depth forged by years of solitary refinement. They did not gather around him out of admiration. They gathered because they felt they could grow in the presence of someone who had already walked the path they feared to take. This is how solitude works. It attracts the right people by first repelling the wrong ones. When you begin your ascent, the world grows quiet. People drift away. Conversations thin. Invitations stop arriving. It feels like failure, but it is alignment. Only when you become your true self do your true allies appear. Modern life hides this truth. We are taught to seek community first, identity second, but the reverse is what shapes the strongest circles. You do not find your people by searching for them. You find them by becoming someone who no longer fears standing alone. At the peak, the air is thin, the silence deeper, but the company, when it arrives, is real. These are not the people who loved the weaker version of you. These are the ones who appear once you've climbed high enough to stand clearly in your own skin. The summit is never crowded, not because few can climb it, but because few are willing to climb alone. A man is not remembered for the noise he made while living, but for the silence he endured while becoming. Loneliness is not a wound, it is a womb, the hidden chamber where identity is formed without interference, where purpose grows without being suffocated by doubt, where destiny gathers itself like a storm preparing to break. Musashi's legend did not grow from his duels alone. It grew from the man he became when no one was watching, when the world doubted him, when he carried nothing but a wooden sword and an iron will. His solitude was not an absence of people, it was the presence of purpose. Each lonely mile he walked, each silent night he endured, each temple ruin he trained within, carved another layer into the mountain of his legacy. And you, in your quiet struggles, walk a similar road. You feel the ache of distance, the burn of uncertainty, the hollow space where companionship used to live. But this is not decay. This is alchemy. This is the transformation of emptiness into identity, pain into clarity, struggle into direction. Do not mistake walking alone for being lost. The man who isolates himself to build his spirit walks straighter than the one who follows a crowd for the illusion of belonging. Solitude is not exile, it is evolution. The world will not recognize you at first. It will misunderstand your distance, your discipline, your refusal to be distracted. But when you emerge, sharper, clearer, heavier with purpose, the same world will wonder how you rose so high. They will see the mountain, never the wind that carved it. They will hear the legend, never the quiet that shaped it. Loneliness is not the price of becoming a legend. Loneliness is the path that makes a legend possible. Walk it without fear. Walk it without apology. Walk it until the man you meet at the end finally feels like the one you were meant to become.